Salvete omnes, this is Emilia, also known as TheMartianGeek, and it's time to start a new series. Not a Let's Play this time, though I will be discussing them. It's time to talk, and there will be a lot of talking, so if you don't have the patience for that, you may want to skip this series. Specifically, it's time to talk about video games and how likely I am to play them. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. You might be familiar with a little game called Magic the Gathering. At least I would assume some of you are. I know there's at least one person who watches my channel who also plays Magic. But I would assume there's at least slightly more overlap than that, given that Let's Plays and collectible card games are both traditionally nerdy activities. If you know much about the game, you might know that there are a lot of different gameplay mechanics that can show up on cards. Most of them are specific to a particular set or expansion, or a few associated sets, and some appear far more frequently than others. In fact, one of the main creative designers of the game, Mark Rosewater, actually came up with the scale to express how likely a particular mechanic is to show up again after having been used one or more times. It's usually a 10-point scale, where 1 indicates that a mechanic is basically guaranteed to show up again, and 10 means that 1 is basically guaranteed not to show up again. It's called the Storm Scale, named after the mechanic Storm, which is a 10 on the scale because it's considered so brokenly overpowered that they don't expect it to ever be in another set. So you might be thinking, okay, that's all well and good, but what does all this have to do with my videos? Well, a while back I had the idea to do a similar scale rating how likely I am to do a Let's Play of a particular game. I call mine the Bayonetta scale, because Bayonetta is one game that I don't expect to ever play on this channel. I think I actually might have even implied that in an older LP before even coming up with the scale. It's not a perfect name for it. The thing about the Storm scale is occasionally a mechanic will actually change rating, and nobody really expects Storm to ever be anything other than a 10, like it won't drop to a 9 or anything like that. And out of the games that I'd rate a 10, I don't think Bayonetta is the absolute most unlikely of them. But it was the first game I thought of as being rated a 10, and it probably rolls off the tongue better as a name for something than some of the other ones do, so I suppose it works well enough. Each number, both on the original scale and mine, also has a certain meaning associated with it. 1 is inevitable, 2 is eventually but not right away, 3 is a strong chance, 4 is a good chance but with issues that make it less guaranteed, 5 is maybe but I'm optimistic, 6 is maybe but I'm not so sure, 7 is unlikely, 8 is the stars would need to align, 9 is I never say never, but it would require a minor miracle, and 10 is I never say never, but this would require a major miracle. And in one case, 11 is I never say never, but this is a never. I will never say never. As far as determining what rating a particular game gets goes, honestly it's kinda ultimately just up to how I feel. It's my scale, my project. There are some factors that can affect it though. Generally, a game will be lower on the scale if it's one I really like. If I enjoy it, I'll probably want to play it, and if I want to play it, and I feel like it would be a good fit for the channel, I'll probably want to record it. A lower rating is also more likely for a game that's from a series that I've already played some entries in on here before, as well as if it's a relatively short and or easy game. Finally, it's a plus if a game is easy to record. Basically, if it's easy to emulate or it's a PC game and doesn't do anything weird with the screen. Conversely, a game is likely to get a higher rating on the scale if I don't like it. Really, that should go without saying. If I don't expect I'd have fun with it, or I know I wouldn't have fun with it from experience, then I probably won't want to do a Let's Play of it. Games can also get penalized if they're hard to record. If I can emulate it well, great. If I can just record it directly from the PC, also good. Otherwise, I'd better be able to use my capture card with it. So if, for instance, you were thinking, hey, you should play this great Xbox One game, well, I don't own one, and I don't think there are any emulators for it, so I'm probably not the person to ask. A higher rating is also more likely for games that are really long or involved. Like, something that takes 50 or more hours to finish might be a bit of a problem, even if it is a good game. Also, even though I don't think it comes up that much, if it's a game that I expect a lot of other people to also be doing playthroughs of, that could potentially bump it up a little. I guess I don't want to feel like I'm being derivative or redundant or something. If I wanted to be derivative, I'd go read my old calculus textbooks. Granted, that never stopped me from playing things like Super Mario Bros. Or Mega Man, but I guess I feel like it's kind of different when it's a game that's been around for a while. If it's one that just came out recently, it just seems like there'll probably already be people doing it who are more entertaining than me, so why wouldn't people just watch them instead? Lastly, if it's a game that I've never actually beaten, or in some cases I've beaten it on an emulator but never a real console, that can also make the rating go up. Also, in the case of games that have multiple gameplay modes, or playable characters, difficulty settings, things like that, some of them might actually get different ratings from others in some cases. And one last thing I should mention, any ratings I give for games here may not necessarily be fixed. Some of them could potentially change over time, especially for games I'm not very familiar with. I don't expect most of them will, but it's a possibility. So now that I've introduced how this is all going to work, let's get to some actual ratings, shall we? Starting with Level 1, Inevitable. This is for games that I pretty much definitely expect to do at some point. I say pretty much because few things are absolute. Basically, the only way I wouldn't get around to these is if I stopped doing Let's Plays altogether. And they include games such as Super Mario Bros. 2, kind of the black sheep of the 2D Mario platformers, really. It's not one of my favorite Mario games, but I like it well enough, and it's very easy to record, so it seems pretty likely. Especially since I already did 3 in World. Classic Mega Man, specifically Mega Man 1, 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, and Mega Man in Base. I've already done 5 games in the series, so I figure why not finish it and do the rest. There aren't any of them that I dislike or that I think would be troublesome to record, though admittedly during my attempted blind run of Mega Man 11 I got some pretty serious frame drop problems. I would hope that that's not an issue now that I have a better computer, but I'd have to check it. And hey, they're fun. Honestly, for this being a series I didn't grow up with, it sure seems like I took to them pretty well. It technically wouldn't be accurate to rate all of them a 1. I mean, we're talking about 7 games here, and I'd like to spread them out. I'd say that Mega Man 9, 10, and 11 would be a 1, while Mega Man 1 and 3, along with Mega Man in Base, would be a 2. Mega Man 6 is kinda somewhere in the middle. I just felt that it made more sense to mention all of them as a group rather than splitting some off for when I talk about my Level 2 games. I'm still not sure what order I should do Mega Man 9, 10, and 11 in though. Whether I should start with 9 and then move on to 10 and then 11, or do 11 first and then come back to 9 and 10. And while we're on the subject of Mega Man games, I do plan to record the rest of the X series as well, those being Mega Man X 5, 7, and 8. Yeah, there aren't nearly as many of those compared to classic Mega Man that I haven't played on here yet, but they're there. Mega Man X 4, 5, and 6 also let you play as 0 for the game instead of X, and we'll get to that possibility in a bit. Beyond that, it's basically the same deal as with the classic series, might as well finish it. Finally, there's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and obviously I already played that game, so you'd think maybe that should be a 0 on the scale. Well, yes, but actually I'd come up with the scale before doing my Let's Play of Tropical Freeze, and I even implied as much in my intro to that game. And it's one of those games that I like so much that I feel like some way, somehow, I would have found some way and occasion to record it on the channel. It also gives me an excuse to point out that if I had come up with the scale before doing any Let's Plays, actually not all of the games I've done would have been a 1. What rating each of the 39 Let's Plays I've done so far would have gotten is a discussion for another day, but definitely some of them would have been a lot more likely than others to show up. With that, we move on to Level 2. Almost definite, if maybe not immediate. This is a lot like a 1. I do expect to do all of these at some point, but not necessarily in the near future. It could take a while for these to come down the pipeline, or I could probably do them anytime, but might not necessarily want to. For instance, Super Mario Bros., the original, that is. I think it's one of the worst Mario games, but it's still okay. Besides, it's the first game in the series, after all. Well, not counting the Mario Bros. Arcade game and stuff, it's the first in the main series with Bowser and Peach and such. Considering that and the fact that it came out in 1985, it's reasonable that it would be overshadowed by future games. And speaking of 2D Mario platformers, there's New Super Mario Bros. Wii, which is much harder to record than Super Mario Bros., but is also a much better game, so I suppose it balances out. Honestly, I think the New Super Mario Bros. Series gets more hate than it deserves. Yeah, they do keep reusing the same world themes and the same music, and I don't like that, but I feel like if you really look at the world themes and the music for the 8 and 16-bit games, the new ones might actually be an improvement over most of those. Heck, look at Super Mario World. Every world in that game, aside from Forest of Illusion, is basically a grassland, a cave, or a special world, and there are only 2 different music tracks for outside levels. Yet it's still probably one of the most beloved games in the series. And I grew up with Super Mario All-Stars and World, so I'm not just being a silly little kid here. That's not to say I'm excusing the homogeneity. I still would like to see more 2D Mario platformers that are a little more original, I guess. In fact, I'd just like to see more 2D Mario platformers in general. Get on that, Nintendo. It's been forever, it feels like. Here's hoping the 2019 E3 won't be as pointless as this year's was. But I feel like the actual level design in the new Super Mario Bros. Games is just as good as or better than the 8 and 16-bit games, at least overall. On the same subject, I would be equally willing to do a playthrough of New Super Mario Bros. U. It's pretty comparable to the Wii game in basically every way: quality, design, ease of recording, personal enjoyment, though admittedly New Super Mario Bros. Wii is not under the impression that Walrus is a number. Though depending on a capture card is something that holds these games back. I don't know. After that thing screwed up so many times during the Tropical Freeze playthrough, I'm kind of not terribly inclined to do a project that requires it in the near future. Then we have Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, otherwise known as Crash Bandicoot 4. The fact that this one is pretty low on the scale shouldn't surprise anyone, considering that I was going to do that instead of Crash Warped before changing my mind at the last minute. It's kind of a similar situation to New Super Mario Bros. Wii and U, actually. Crash 3 and 4 are fairly similar to each other, for better or for worse. Crash 4 is a PS2 game, but I'm pretty sure I can emulate those now, so that shouldn't be a problem. The thing about Crash Bandicoot games is there aren't really that many of them, and there especially aren't that many good ones, so I kinda want to spread those out. Finally, there's the matter of doing more Let's Plays with text commentary rather than voice. I had originally had this as a 5 on the scale before I realized that there's an important difference between doing a playthrough that's entirely text commentary and doing one that merely contains text commentary. The former is still a 5, but the latter I'm willing to do whenever I find it necessary. In fact, I even did that recently when I did the time trials for Crash Bandicoot Warped. And that actually is closest in meaning to a 2 on the original scale. Though videos with text commentary are very time-consuming to edit compared to ones with voice, albeit easier to find time to record because since it's post-production commentary, doing the actual recording part isn't much different from just playing the game normally. I'm also not really sure how people feel about them. Like, do you guys like it when I do text commentary? Did you like the way I did the Crash 3 time trials or the Game Boy Advance version of Donkey Kong Country 3? Leave your opinion in the comments. So with that, that's about all I have for the start of this series. Honestly, I really don't have that many games that are close to the definite end of the scale. It's pretty much just stuff I've already done and stuff from series that I've already done. We should start getting into some more unique stuff next time though, so I'll see you then.